Today on Horror Explained, we'll be covering The Walking Dead's TV show. It's about a zombie apocalypse that goes on throughout the world and a man that ends up getting shot in a coma, and he has to go try and find his family. But he meets some friends along the road, so enjoy. Okay, so we start The Walking Dead off with a car coming down the street. It actually ends up being a cop named Rick Grimes, our main character, trying to look for gas for his police car. And we obviously see that all these cars are abandoned or destroyed, so we're definitely in the apocalypse. He keeps looking around the wreckage of all the cars, but ends up hearing footsteps. So he follows up to him and ends up thinking that's a person, and it ends up being a girl. But little does he know that girl was a zombie. So he shoots her in the head without any hesitation, and that's how we start the intro of The Walking Dead. After we get back from the title, we see that Rick and one of his best friends, also a cop, Shane, sit and talk about women and all of their problems, until they end up getting a call in saying there's armed people and that they need help. So Rick and all of his other friends end up racing over, setting spikes down, getting ready for the shooters to come down the road. So the car ends up speeding straight down the road and does the best car stunt ever, flipping and turning around. Rick, Shane, and the others end up taking out the shooters, and Rick almost gets shot, but another shooter ends up coming out and shooting Rick while he's not paying attention. Rick starts to bleed out as Shane tries to protect him, and he ends up passing out. We see that he kind of wakes up not knowing what's actually happening, and he sees Shane trying to talk to him in a dazed form as he gives him flowers. And of course, Rick, being drugged out, thinks he's talking to him and ends up seeing no one there, and also actually sees that the flowers that he gave him are dried out now. So Rick ends up getting up, seeing a chair in front of his door, probably protecting him. And as he's trying to get out, he sees a woman with no skin left on her body. Even though it's dark, Rick ends up finding the exit and gets out. And as soon as he walks out, you see all of the dead corpses from the people that died in the hospital, just people randomly, probably from this virus. Rick ends up biking his way all the way home to find out that his family's gone, but also he's missing some of his own pictures and some of the family pictures, so they're probably not dead. Of course, Rick has a breakdown, but ends up getting back up and ends up trying to look around for people. He ends up thinking that he's seeing a person, which it actually is a walker, but he's trying to call them over, in which he doesn't see a kid named Dwayne hits him in the head with a shovel. Dwayne's dad, Morgan, ends up coming over, which is actually Rick's neighbor, and he sees if Rick's alive or not, and Rick just ends up passing out. Morgan ends up fixing him up and asking him simple questions on how he got his scars and if he's been bit or not. Rick, of course, is being like, bit, what do you mean? And know that he got shot. Morgan explains that the virus makes you want to just consume flesh, and if you get bit by those zombies that you will turn. Because sadly, Morgan and Dwayne had to see it, and his wife. Next morning, they get Rick to try to show him how to kill a walker, and he ends up taking it out successfully. Rick ends up taking Morgan and Dwayne, showing them that he knows that half the pictures and shirts and clothes are missing, so he knows that his family are gone, and he's gonna look for them. Rick also looks around the house and finding the keys from the police station, ends up taking them. They get to the police station where they have hot water, and also that they ended up leaving the guns. As Morgan, Rick, and Dwayne are about to leave, Morgan says he has unfinished business with his undead wife. So Rick gives Morgan a walkie-talkie, and they both go their own ways. We see as Rick goes his way, he's using his walkie to try to get onto a radio station and see if anybody can hear him, in which another group actually does hear him that's nearby, but he can't hear them. And he definitely wants to meet this group because Shane is still alive. Also, Shane has been taking care of Lori and Carl, making sure that they're okay, but I'm guessing that him and Lori probably have a stronger connection. Anyways, now we're back to where we were at the beginning of the episode. Since Rick couldn't end up finding gas, he found something even better, a horse. So we see Rick riding into Atlanta, also being the Walking Dead cover for season 1. As Rick was riding the roads on a horse, he ends up seeing a reflection of a helicopter and ends up trying to run for it, but runs into a horde of walkers. He ends up getting circled by walkers, so the horse ends up getting dropped. He ends up dropping the bag of guns, so ends up crawling under the tank, shooting the walkers as they come. Rick, thinking that he has to shoot himself, almost does, but sees that the hatch is open and climbs in. Which, as soon as he climbs in, he sees that he left his gun. He thinks that it's all over, thinking that he has no chance left, until he hears the radio start talking, saying that he knows where he's at. And that's how we end the first episode. And next episode, we'll see who's trying to talk to Rick. So we're back with episode 2, and we see that the RV people that are still surviving are still there. But while everybody's doing their chores, Lori ends up going out to look for vegetables or any types of plants she can find. But instead, she ends up getting a hand to the mouth, and Shane ends up putting her down. She obviously ends up seeing that Shane, and they end up making out. And now we come back with Rick in the tank. The walkie-talkie guy ends up telling him exactly where he needs to run and that he doesn't have time to dilly-dally and he needs to go now. Rick ends up following the path and ends up seeing the man named Glenn and ends up following him. They end up seeing a ladder, which I would not walk on, but you know, walkers. Then once they get to the top, we see that the other group isn't too happy because Rick was shooting off too many shots, arousing all the zombies. So of course the group isn't going to kill Rick, but they're going to figure out what they got to do next thanks to Rick. And they show Rick how much damage he's actually done. They end up going all the way upstairs to a man named Merle Dixon, Daryl's brother, if you've ever played the game. Him and this black dude named T-Dog end up getting into a racial fight in which Merle beats him. But for the moment, the whole entire crew is trying to figure out how to get to this van. They end up handcuffing Merle to a drainage pipe since he can't take care of himself, while Rick and the others find a very disgusting plan. And that plan basically being, him and Glenn have to walk out with zombie guts all over them to keep themselves hidden. And everything ends up seeming to go pretty well until the others notice that it's about to rain. So with their disguises washing off as they run, they end up taking out zombies as they go and try to jump the fence. And they could jump a fence faster than me, I'd probably fall. But anyways, they make it on the other side, get the RV, and get back to the group. But Glenn and Rick also know that they're not going to be able to get past all those walkers, so they get another idea. While everyone else is trying to get their bags, they forget about Merle for a second. But T-Dog comes back for him, of course, but ends up dropping the key in the drain pipe. Rick helps Glenn find a car that has a car alarm going off and attracts the walkers. Rick and others get away, leaving Merle. And we see that Merle probably isn't going to be okay. But that's also what you get for being racist in the apocalypse. So we end up seeing Glenn speed down the street. And next episode, we're going to figure out where the rest of their team is. And then we're back with episode 3, seeing that Merle is still on the roof talking to himself, probably having a heat stroke. But as soon as he snaps into reality, he sees that walkers are about to fill through the doors, and as he's crying, he tries to reach for the hacksaw. We end up seeing what team Glenn was talking about. It was actually the team of people that were talking to Rick off the walkie-talkie. Everyone ends up getting reacquainted with their family. And that's where Rick sees Shane and his wife and son. They're perfectly fine, and he finally can know that. They end up spending the whole afternoon and night looking at pictures and talking until they end up falling asleep. So Rick ends up waking up the next day, and as soon as he gets out of his tent, he ends up hearing Carl and Sophia end up finding a walker, and they end up finding it, beating it up, but end up not shooting it in the head, which Daryl does for them. Daryl Dixon is Merle's brother, and he's basically a hunter survivor and someone you probably don't want to mess with. Daryl's like, "Where's Merle?" and Rick ends up telling him that they left him. So Rick ends up explaining to his wife that he's about to leave again. Like he just met his family again. What? But Rick does give a good explanation, saying that he does need to go back for the bag of guns that he did leave. So Glenn, Rick, T-Dog and Daryl end up driving off to go look for Merle. And we get to see that Shane actually told Lori that Rick died, so she's really mad and will not let him spend time with Carl, which seems to make Shane a little mad. So Andrea, this blonde lady, tries standing up to Ed, the abusive husband to this woman named Carol, in which he slaps Carol trying to pull her in. But Shane's pissed, so he's really not playing around with this. He ends up beating Ed to a pulp and telling him if he ever lays hands on his wife again that he will kill him. And we see that our little crew ended up finally getting back to Merle, but it seems like they were too late. Did Merle survive? Let's find out next episode. And we're back with episode 4, seeing that Andrea and her sister Amy sit on the boat, talk about how their dads taught them different knots as they were growing up at different times. Back in Atlanta, it doesn't look like Daryl's doing too good about his brother, but the crew still pursues it and they look for his trail. And I guess it doesn't matter what type of knot you use because they both come back with a lot of fish. And Rick and the others end up knowing where the bag is, so they make a plan, split up, T-Dog and Rick on one thing, and Daryl waits for Glenn on the other. But as soon as Glenn gets back to Daryl, he ends up getting ran up on by a whole nother crew that ends up taking Glenn and leaving the guns. But it also was actually a switch up because they got Glenn and they got one of their men. So he goes to the leader once and it doesn't work, and they come back saying, "We're tired of this plan and we're ready and armed." And bullets were about to fly until they seen that they were actually taking care of the elderly. They said that all the old people that got left in their homes were actually just abandoned and that they ended up protecting them, and that's why they used guns. So of course Rick, understanding what's going on, he ends up giving them some guns, which is kind of useless because we never see this team again. Anyways, as soon as they're back at the RV, it's gone, and Daryl says that's definitely Merle that took it. And since the other crew ain't back, all the others are sitting at a campfire eating, which goes pretty well until Ed thinks he has a visitor and ends up being a walker. Andrea's sister Amy wasn't too lucky either because she got bit as she was trying to use the bathroom. Rick and the others get back to hearing all the screaming and try to run in with all their guns. And we see that the group took out some walkers, but it looks like the walkers took some of them out too. And we start episode 5 off with Rick trying to get in contact with Morgan but can't reach him on the walkie. He just tells him about how Atlanta is not a safe place and how they've lost people. Rick ends up signing off saying he'll wait for him next morning. And Andrea's not doing too well either. But everyone else is making sure that all of the walkers are dead, making sure to hit them in the head. They gotta make sure that the walkers are 100% dead, so Carol makes sure that Ed is 100% dead. And Andrea's just sat under her sister this whole time, so her sister's coming back alive, but not in the good way. This man Jim ain't doing too well either because he got bit and it's slowly taking over his mind. Rick and Shane end up going on a run for some type of food that they can find for the others, in which they end up hearing a sound, so they end up splitting up. And it looks like Shane isn't coping too well to having Rick around, because he almost shoots him with a shotgun but ends up putting it down last second. Rick and Shane explain that they're gonna have to go to the CDC and it's gonna be a long journey, so Morales and his family end up going their own way, in which they thank everyone for helping them. The car goes their own way and the RV head to the CDC, and that's where we're going next. But of course, since they've been on the road for so long, Jim can't survive any longer, so they end up all saying their goodbyes and they end up getting back on the road. But speaking of a CDC, we end up seeing a man by the name of Jenner who possibly knows how to cure the zombie virus but ends up getting some in his glove. So as soon as he goes into the decontamination center, it ends up blowing up all of his work. And now he doesn't really care about surviving or doesn't care about how to stop the virus. But our group doesn't know that as they're walking up to the CDC, Jenner ends up getting notified and the others try to get somebody to answer, but Rick swears he's seen the camera move, so he's not going. Rick screams for help and tells them that they're starving. As he's about to walk off, Jenner opens the door. And next episode, we'll see what Jenner's gonna help them with. So we start the season finale episode off with actually Shane not being a douchebag for once. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, he was actually trying to save Rick while he was in a coma after getting shot, but he couldn't because he was too scared of all the plugs in him. So Shane ends up putting his bed in front of his door and ends up actually saving his life and ends up running. We cut back to the team at the CDC now, as everyone takes everything in since they haven't ate for a couple of days. And as soon as they walk in, they meet Jenner with the AR. And Jenner also explains that if they come in, that they have to stay in and can't go out. But they end up having a better meeting and end up all eating and drinking over a nice meal, where Carl actually tries wine for the first time. He don't like it. Anyways, everybody gets to get in the shower and enjoy themselves, while others are dealing with their problems in other ways. But Shane comes drunk into Lori's room and starts acting like she owes him something, and he might have tried to sexually abuse her if she didn't scratch him on the neck, and that's when he realizes he went way too far. But they came to CDC not to eat, they wanted to know things. So Jenner finally shows them what actually happens to a person when they turn into a walker. He shows a neuroscan of what your brain actually looks like functioning, and he basically shows that when your brain stops functioning, a stem of it still keeps you walking, but your brain stays gone. And as Dale's looking around and saying he doesn't want to make it any worse, he asks why there's a countdown happening. And Dale basically asks what happens when that timer gets to 0. And Jenner's AI computer ends up telling him that the place will end up incinerating itself, killing everyone in it. And then making things even worse, he ends up closing off the doors so the team can't get out. Until everyone sits and pleads for their life, Jenner ends up actually opening the door back up, so they end up getting ready and all the team runs. But as soon as they leave, Jenner tells Rick a nice deep secret that we're not going to learn until next season. Jackie, the black lady being T-Dog's wife, says she don't want him to stay, but she wants to stay because this is how she wants to die. And the blonde lady Andrea and the old man Dale stay with them. But last second, Andrea and Dale get out right in time. The building incinerates itself with Jenner and Jackie inside of it. And as the crew sees they have no hope left, and they end up driving off, and next season we'll see where the road takes them. See y'all.